And thank you.
Recording in progress.
We're going. Good to go, John. Go ahead.
I do a number of workshops. In fact, I just came back from Yosemite, did a 1 week workshop in Yosemite, and the weather was special. I had 13 people, and I usually do that in June, but this time it had been so much snow in the upper portion of Yosemite that the valley was flooding. So they closed it a lot of times. So I didn't get rooms until September. And I reserved rooms right at the Yosemite Lodge, which is in the center of the valley. I also do a workshop in Smoky Mountains in April of each year. And if you're on my email list, you'll get the notice. If you're not, give your email address to Hylos and he can send it to me and I'll get you on my email list. I really enjoy doing presentations, and tonight the one I'm going to be doing is called Nature Captured and Presented. So I'll share my screen and we'll start that, I think. Yes. All right. You see my first screen, right?
Yes, that's a great
Yeah, we got
picture
it.
for your obituary.
Okay, thank you. You're such a character. All right, let me start.
Yeah, that's better.
Nature captured and presented. And what I mean is that we look at nature in many ways, and it can be more than just scenics. And you want to do the compositions in a certain way. Mostly what I thought about nature being photographed, I broke it into three categories really, but two major categories. One, which consists of the real world, and the other documentary of the world, and then artistic reality, and that's a term I came up with, meaning that you've taken images, digital images, and you've used either Photoshop or Lightroom or some of the other packages and have done some amazing things with them. And so what I will say is that in the real world, I will talk about color. And I also will show black and white, which really stands out at times. In the artistic world, digital art, an image taken into Photoshop, possibly, or wherever, and background put in, other things put in, and I'll break these down into subsections. So the first thing that I always want to emphasize, whether it's nature or any other kind of photography that you're doing, especially if you are in a competition, the minute it comes in front of the viewer, it should have impact. Boom, right there. The second thing is it should have very strong composition, because otherwise the viewer eyes starts roaming all around looking for other things within the image. Don't do that. And the other is presenting it in color, black and white, sharpness, those kinds of things. So I'll go through some of this. Nature at a distance is what I talk about first. Is you want to know about the lenses that you should be using, and should you use macro if it's a very close up to a butterfly or something like that. But if you're out in the field, it should be a telephoto so that you get up close to nature, to an animal. Do panoramas, especially with scenics. Think about this. If you have a camera now that's doing 30 meg and you're seeing a broad spectrum in front of you, if you actually do three panoramas, three shots for a panorama, you have 90 some meg rather than a single shot wide angle. So think about doing panoramas, and I'll talk about those. Composition should be very strong. I'll go through some aspects of that. And some very simple but very effective artistic techniques that I do, and I'll show you the impact of those. So first of all, instant impact. When that came on the screen, you right away looked at that frog's head. I come back, go back, right there. That's where your eye goes. So instant impact. instant impact. You look right at that. And in this case, especially because of the highlights, and notice that it's backlit, not front lit, but it does have some front lighting, but the background has been reduced and turned black to make this stand out more three-dimensional. I realize this is not a nature, but I thought it was very interesting to talk about the various aspects of where your eye goes. Your eye, we read left to right. So your eye you look from left to the right part of an image when it comes up in front of you. And so the woman and the wheel is on the right-hand side, so that's where you stop, and you would come back, look at the left side, but you don't go off the right-hand side of the image. This is one of my favorite scenics that I did up in northern Italy, the Dolomites. And I want to point out how I did it in the sense of, here's the lightest area. That's where your eye goes to see what's going on in that area. Then I have a little darker area. Then I have a lighter area. And you notice that I have detail in the shadows. And when you have any image where there's dark against light in the background of it, it makes it stand out three-dimensionally. So I always look for that kind of thing. Pure nature enhanced. Here's a straight shot. Here's a straight shot, but that blue could be darkened just a little bit so that the head stands out more. Look at the difference of the three-dimensionality. Whoop, come back. From here, simply because that blue is lighter, and so your eye roams around, but this darker blue, and all I did was select it and darken it, and now the head stands out even more. This is not my image. I got it from Facebook, and I just thought it was so amusing with the frog done up with the dress on it. So the final presentation could be anything you want it to be based on, are you doing a competition? Are you doing it for yourself? Or you just don't be afraid to do those things. Artistic reality, AI digital art. Boy, digital art is becoming a very, very difficult thing to talk about, because if you use purely Word Journey, which is a software product, and you don't have any photograph in there, you're just keying in words, and this is what comes out of it, this kind of image. That's not photography. It's beautiful art, and it's artistic, but it's not photography. And so the clubs are having a very difficult time having anything submitted like this, but how do you know that it was submitted, it was created by AI rather than by Photoshop or some other element? Very difficult time right now. Here's what I call artistic reality. Bird, of course, is real. The reflection a little bit there. This is by Sally Hale, who's a very good friend of mine. And I thought she did such a good job of using similar colors throughout the background. But the bird stands out significantly, especially because of the highlights and the detail in the bird. And the darker area around the head has the head stand out more. It's light against dark. So what's so difficult about making an effective nature image? Just use the right lens, right? I hear that all the time. Well, that is not the case. Yes, you need to have your lens based on what kind of photography you want to do. Today, I have just one lens. It's a 28 to 300 lens, so I can cover a wide range of things. And not always looking to change my lens every time I decide to do something else. Now, I don't do macros, so I'd have to have a macro lens, but I have a single lens now. So I will talk about telling a story, because that is such an important part of what you're doing when you are bringing an image in front of someone. You're telling a story. You're eliciting their motion, the emotion, but you're also telling what's going on within the image. So instant impact. I shot this and I changed the background. There was a lot of trees and shrubs and so on, but when that comes up, as it did, it is instant impact. Very important about nature images. Got this from Facebook. I think, boy, you can't stop looking at the eyes. It's so special because, and it has that instant impact. And in a way, it tells a story in that here are the claws down at the bottom. It elicits an emotion. So instant impact tells a story, elicits an emotion. Those are the best nature images. I shot this in the zoo here in Atlanta. And as I was standing there, oh, by the way, that's a female orangutan. And a guard was walking by and he said, let me tell you about this. The little one, the parents were killed accidentally. And so it was an orphan. Well, what happens with orangutans is they will adopt the baby, which this mother did, and will keep it until it's 14 years old. So I'm doing various photographs of this, and I'm trying to get it somehow that it would elicit an emotion more than just mama looking up. And here's what happened. Mama turned to the baby, looked right at the baby's face, and I darkened the background. You see the highlights all along the top of the arm, the head. And so when this image now comes up, you look right into the two faces and it elicits an emotion, tells a story. Tells a story. Mother and child elicits the emotion. And look at the eyes on the mother and how it just feels love coming from that. Each of these instant impact tells a story. This is the emotion. And here's the thing I noticed about this one on the left, that it really is tied together through a triangle. That those three sets of eyes really are come together, and you tend then to look right at those eyes and faces. Yes, you see the rest of the image, but you just concentrate on that. And the one on the right, the highlights are coming down onto the hands and a little bit of the face. And the darkened background allows it to stand out more. I shot this in Costa Rica, and little frog. These frogs, little green frogs, are only 3 inches long. And so caught him crossing over from one piece of the plant to the other. And I thought, how does your eye enter the image? Remember what I said earlier? Your eye comes in from the left of the image. How does your eye stay in the image? I call things containments. If there's a containment to keep your eye in, and in this case, it's the darker area in the bottom right and upper right that is containment. You come back with your eye back to the brighter area, which is the frog's head. And where does your eye rest? It rests on the brightest area, always. So I got this off the web also. And I thought, boy, you can't get away from eliciting emotion, mama holding the baby. But being that it's left to right, looking left to right, that means you follow mama's eyes out the right-hand side. If I just turn this horizontally, now you're looking right into the face, right there. And it's such a difference. Watch. From here, how you're reading this, and your eyes go off the right-hand side a bit. You're not even looking at the face as much. The baby one, yes. But now you really concentrate on the parent and the child, much more so. Simply by flipping it horizontally. I put this in here because of what I call leading lines. All the water is leading right up to that rock. All that is very important when you're photographing. Watch for the leading lines. Even up in the sky, the clouds are leading lines down to that main element. Very good. And we have dark against light. dark against light at each of where those rocks are. So they stand out three-dimensionally. Also, consider just darkening the bottom of the image a little bit. Don't lose the detail there, but just darkening that pushes the eye much more into the center because you want to see highlights. And along the top of the image, just darkening along the top of the sky just a little bit brings your eye down into the center. Now, if you look at this image on your screen, you'll notice it's a little darker at the top, a little darker at the bottom. And oh, yes, that's highlights are in the center. Brings you right into it, especially that leading line in the water. There it is, leads you right up to that main element. Here's the dark against the light. I've seen a lot of star shots and things, but I thought what was really special about this one was it has three dimensions, a foreground, a middle ground, and a background, and something of interest to see. So you have those major elements on this, and it's not just the upper sky area. Foreground, middle ground, background, very important. Gives three-dimensionality. I'll emphasize it even more. Shot this one out west. So here's the foreground, middle ground, background. And if I call this place to stand. Seems that I've coined a phrase because a number of other people now are using that expression. Give your viewer a place to stand. Because if you can give them a place to stand, they feel part of the image. Let me show you this without the place to stand. Now you are just looking at the image. Yes, over here on the left, there's a little bit where you could say, okay, a place to stand, but not down here, making it three-dimensional. You really want to be able to have a way for the viewer to be standing in the image with you and seeing it three-dimensionally. And you notice that there's this dark against light. It's not overlapping with the reflection in the water of the mountains. And it really is a little bit of a darkness along the bottom and a little bit more darkness along the top to bring your eye down into the center of the image. So let's talk about just composition overall. Certainly learn the rule of thirds if you don't. Somebody said, oh, I must use it. No, it's just a guideline, but it is a very important one. I talked about left to right, leading lines, and containments, and I'll explain containments more. And then special light, front light, back light, side light, above. I think side light and back light, very special. Then above, front light tends to flatten out images, but you then could do something in Photoshop. But I just keep in mind that backlight, side light, very interesting images that way. And what is the brightest area? So let's look at some things. The rule of thirds. Here's that image, that little frog I shot down in Costa Rica. And it was a simple background. I didn't change it, I just darkened it. But if you look at the rule of thirds, the PowerPoint, which is the cross of this upper right area, is right where his main eye is located. And the PowerPoint that's what they're called, where it crisscrosses a PowerPoint, is down where the flower is coming up through that. So that's very important. If you hold on 1 minute, folks, somebody just came to the door. I need to do it. I'll be right back.
I've always wanted to tell this joke on a Zoom session. So a kangaroo walks into the bar. That's it.
He didn't hop in the bar.
No, he walked. He was super normal.
Okay.
Hey, Don, while John's running out, can you give us a real quick update from you? And Diane, we'll catch you next month unless it takes a little bit longer.
Oh, he's muted.
Hey, Don, if you will, try and hit your space bar. Sometimes that works.
Yeah,
Turns on the microphone.
No,
Oh, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Diane, would you like to share a little bit about yourself? Even though
she's
there's not a
muted
woman
too.
on the call?
Yes.
How did that happen?
Uh, well, I guess I don't really know what to share. I guess I have more questions than I have things to share. Tell me a little bit about what is the typical member like in terms of, uh, I don't know.
Well,
I guess I'm eager to find out, about the different members and,
Are you kind of talking about skill levels or interests or what?
yeah, a variety of things. Yeah. Yeah, that. And I guess I don't know what I'm asking.
It's no problem. Our club runs the gamut from pure novices. We just had a new guy that joined last.
Tell you what happened. Somebody ran into my car and a fellow just was sent by here to do an estimate on the damage and I had to see them. So go on from here. You see where the major highlight is? It's right in the center there. And I actually adjusted that. So I darkened the flower down a little bit in the lower left and used the dodge tool to brighten up the head. And the face is brighter than the other bright areas so that your eye goes there instantly and stays there. Left to right. I've talked about it now. Let me demonstrate. Here, I got this off the web. Very nice, very pretty. Actually, use that word, pretty, shot of a waterfall. But I'll bet you that your eye comes in, looks at the fall, and then looks over here to the right and goes off because it's empty over there. If I do nothing more to this image than flip it horizontally, look at the difference of how you read that. Now your eye comes in from the left and it goes right to the waterfall. You're not looking around here trying to find something to see. You're seeing it instantly. Left to right. Oh, I'm sorry. He's just rang the bell again. I've got to go and I'll be right back, but I've got to see. Apologize again. I sure will not do it again. They have gone home. So left to right. Look at this image. It is beautiful. And does it tell a story? Absolutely, it tells a story. And the composition is strong, comes up all, but let me show you it flipped horizontally. There's where it's going, and your eye goes up off the top right. Flip it horizontally. Now your eye comes right in, and because that's the brighter area, concentrates on the action within this image versus this way, just left to right. Very important. This is my shot I did well, about 2 years ago. And I thought, oh yeah, why aren't there any clouds in the sky? Oh, well, I'll just have to put them in. But I wanted to make sure I had good detail in the shadow areas and detail in the head especially. And it was flying in that direction. So I thought, I know, just going to flip it. So because you're looking and it is looking out that way, pushes you out there. So if I flip it horizontally, now you come in from the left and you look right into the head. And there are some aspects about this that when I put in a blue sky, darker sky up in the upper left, down to lighter in the bottom to give it a little bit more interest, and put in clouds instead of the blue sky. It's so easy nowadays with Photoshop sky replacement. This was before that time, and I would just select the bird and then put it into another layer with clouds. But look at the difference of three-dimensionality with the clouds versus just the blue sky. And I wanted to send this down in the lower left, blue, so that it pushes your eye up into the face of the eagle. That's what you should concentrate on. So I lightened the head just a little bit. And you notice that your eye will come to the right, then the wing brings you back down around, and then you go up to look at the top wing, and so you circle around the image. and coming in from left to right. That wing going straight down is what I call containment. You don't jump over it and start going off the right-hand side. It holds you in the image. It contains your vision. Shot this in Costa Rica, and it's a kingfisher. And I was on a boat, could not get very close to it. In fact, they're so skittish that had we probably moved a little closer, it would have been gone. But it was eating a fish. Oh, this is great. So I get the shot, left to right, remember? So here's left to right, cropped in tight on the bird and the fish in the mouth. But this way, reading it, your eye goes off the right-hand side. And the bird's looking right, you look over that way. If I flip it horizontally, now that tree brings you right up to the bird, and you look right into the eye of the bird from there, and you don't spend a lot of time looking at the right-hand side of the image. Very important in nature photography. Very important in nature photography. Jerry Black did this one, and I thought, oh, this is really special. This is not the way he shot it, but I flipped it so that you would see the aspects of left to right, because this is the way he shot it. And you see what a difference it makes to seeing it, and go back to the other one, seeing it this way, which leads you off the right-hand side, to this way, and lightening the background a bit so the head stands out even more. Darken the feathers a little bit, but keep the detail, keep the detail. And these grasses down in the lower right are, I think, very important containments. They're holding your eye in to look up at the bird's head. And there's this V shape pushing your eye back to the left side of the image. Very good, very strong. And there's detail. It didn't crop off the wing, didn't crop off the feet. So many times I've seen bird images and they say, well, it was moving so fast. Well, just don't be so zoomed in so tightly. Open up a little bit, crop off later. The grass is very important. Let's talk about a little bit more leading lines and fill the image. If you're photographing animals, the face should be absolutely sharp. So here, I shot this at the Atlanta Zoo. You have the darkness here, but there's detail, but it's not sharp, which pushes your eye even more so into the sharper area. So the blurred foreground works in a way of guiding you to where I want you to go. And the head is brighter than the background, which very darker areas, I darkened those and allowed a little bit more highlight around the head to bring the eye up there. That's what you concentrate on instantly. This is Shiprock out in the Southwest, and I've done some workshops out there, and I think it's just such a neat place. That rock's sticking right up, and these leading lines here. So boy, you can't help but have that leading line pointing right to that shiprock. But here in the foreground, I maneuvered so that I could get those rocks pointing at shiprock. Because if I was over more to the left, it pushed those out and they weren't lining up with that. So I was very sensitive to having that leading line. And the clouds were leading down into the image itself. Then those darker rocks pushing you to shiprock and the lighter area with the color here. And there's no blowout. There's texture in all the highlights. A very important aspect about an image, all images. And here's the center of attention. I got this off the web also, but I thought, boy, it emphasizes so many things. Here's the leading line. Here's the leading line coming up to it. It forces you to see that spire sticking up, the highlights coming down off the rocks from the left, pointing right at that spire sticking up, and the spire dark against light. And then the upper area dark, pushing you down in, and the lower right area darker, pushing you up into the center of the image. Or you can't get away from leading lines on this. They are there in every way you can think about it. And again, on the clouds, pointing you right down to that center of interest and dark against light. There it is. Now, in this case, your eye doesn't stay where the brightest part is. Your eye stays where the darkest part is because it stands out so much. And the other aspects of the image are all the leading lines takes you into it. Three-dimensionality. Leading lines, three-dimensionality, detail everywhere, texture in the highlights, bright areas, but there's detail in every area. But look at all the lines pointing to that person standing there. Now, I have talked a lot about tell a story. That person standing there tells the story. It's not just a scenic. And it elicits an emotion of, oh, geez, there's somebody standing there. And the reflection, perfect, beautiful reflection, and all these leading lines right down to that figure standing there. Leading lines, boy, that little cabin. What's so special also is that cloud right over the top of it. Now, the upper part of the image is darkened. In between the rows, there's a little bit of darkening, maybe a little too much. So it could be some detail in that area on the left. There's good detail in this area. And I think it works fairly well as a square format. Not everything needs to be, a scenic needs to be a long horizontal or vertical. I think the square format works very well for this, especially with that cloud at the top. And I think it's interesting about this image also is, although that's the brightest area, you keep coming back to that cabin because of all these strong leading lines leading to it. Leading lines, wow. And the brightest area is in the center. You see the darker areas up around. Great detail in the reflection and in the tree. Good details everywhere. One of the things I think is very important, very good images, whether it's a scenic or any other kind of image, is that shadows should have detail where the eye expects to see detail, and highlights should have texture. They shouldn't be blown out. And that came from Ansel Adams' books, that when you're looking into a dark area, unless you expect it to be so dark and your mind says, no, I don't need to see it, you should have detail in that area. How about a containment in this case? Your eye comes in from there, and that larger flower becomes the containment to push you back down to look at the frog. So brightest area and special light, special light. I shot this in Costa Rica, and the brightest area, of course, right up here in the head. I shouldn't say, of course, I lightened it. It wasn't that bright. In fact, the whole image was in sort of a shaded area, and I wanted to be sure that I had good detail everywhere. And then I could darken the background. I'm thinking of all those things as I'm shooting, and I'm maneuvering around for 3 dimensions, left to right, or I'll flip it left to right. But I'm looking to see how will the viewers, how I see as my eye comes in, but the viewer, how they come into it. And when you have an animal or a bird or whatever, I believe that the head should be the brightest area so that you go right to it. Right there. That's the brightest portion of the whole image. I found this on the web. What a unique composition with all of that working. Curve of the neck and the head down. But I tend to go off the right-hand side. And if I just do nothing more than flip it, what a tremendous more impact this image has by looking at it this way. And it's the white against the dark, but good detail in all of those feathers, every part of the image, good detail. Down here where the nest would be, great detail. And your eye now comes in and flows up through the center of the bird. And that's the brightest area. High contrast, 3-dimensionality. Backlight. Backlight can be very special, but it's very difficult to handle it in the sense of making sure that you have detail in the foreground, that it doesn't go black because you have such bright areas all behind it. Maybe you need to do a high dynamic range, multiple shot in order to put it together. But look how that stands out. That backlight on those wings, giving the great detail in them. And instantly, I'll come back to this. Where does your eye go? Wow, right there to those wings and the tail. And it's against the darker background, the light coming down, probably from the upper right in the background. And those are highlights, the lights against dark to create that three-dimensionality. Very high contrast. Here also, very high contrast. Front light. Front light tends to soften everything in the image, which, if the image is applicable to that, works really well. I think it works really well in this case. You see great detail in all the white areas, a little bit blurred on the edges, on the left and right edges, to bring your eye back into the sharpest area, because your eye goes right to where it's going to be sharp. And in this case, the eyes aren't glaring in the sense of color. They're there, but it's not as bright as the others. So front light, sharp, and blurred areas to bring the eyes right in. The impact also here is the cropping, bringing you right into the face immediately. And here's that triangle tying three things together. This is Jerry Black's also. And I said, Jerry, really, did you shoot the two birds separately and then you do it as a composite and put them together? He said, no, I was fortunate that those two birds were flying that way. However, I had been there for 3 hours shooting birds and didn't have anything real special. And then this happened and it really worked well. And that tree down there, I think is very important to push your eye up to the birds. And the lower right area darkened a little bit to bring your eye up there. That's what you do is you come in, you see the bush and you look up into the face of the two birds. The dark wing against the highlight area, three-dimensional. I shot this in Costa Rica also, and I thought, very pretty. The reflections in the water is very nice. Compositionally, it's almost a triangle here, coming from the upper right to the point, and then back to the right from the point. I thought, think about how the direction of the light was, and it was soft light. So it's a little brighter here than it is on this side of the flowers, but it wasn't, I did not want to lose any detail in the flowers. So did that. And then I converted it to a sepia. And I think this shows better as a sepia for a nature image than that one. So it's just prettier. I think prettier is the word. And you even see the reflections more. Come back to this. You see that reflection, but it doesn't stand out three-dimensionally as much as giving a little more contrast to the image and showing it as a sepia. And then I took the sepia and combined it with the color image so that the flowers are the actual color and the rest of the image is more sepia. A long way home, a long road home, but boy, the leading lines take you right up there. And I keep saying that because it's so important about the images and how do you direct the viewer to where you want them to go. Certainly that upper right-hand corner being brighter gets your eye up there, but this road takes you there. You even tend to ignore that up there and you follow the road on up into the image. I shot this in Disney World many years ago, and I was watching it wandering, and I wanted to wait until it would get to where it was light against the dark background. And so I kept photographing, and it turned out that it walked where there was some dark background and some water. Now your eye comes in, flows around the bird, all the way around, and because of the reflection, it brings you right back up to the face of the bird standing there. So it's presented as a vertical so that it flows really well overall. Way around. Brightest area, immediate eye location. I know I'm emphasizing that even more, but here's again the little frog in Costa Rica. And in this case, those bright areas, well, his eye is taking you off to the right, but those bright areas are really a problem. So I flipped it horizontally, and then I need to deal with those because that's where your eye is going. You're actually ignoring the frog. And I would like to crop in a little bit more and not have him be quite in the center. So I'll crop in so that I move him a little bit more to the right in relation to the rule of thirds and darken the background. Look at all that background. And I removed those highlights. I cloned them out and then darkened around, did some highlights around him, but especially on the head and the feet, so they stand out. Now here's the original image. Looking that way, flip it, remove the highlights, contrast, sharpness. Now you look right at the frog instantly. Right there. Rule of thirds. I found this image. Again, the highlights are so important. There it is. Tells that story of the mother and the child and the brightest area, especially against the black background, three-dimensionality. Or the flower, light against the background, very important, gives three-dimensionality. And because it's the brightest area and the sharpest, your eye goes there. And these other areas add to it, but they are out of focus and darkened so that you don't spend any eye time other than right there. Talk about enhancements and composites. How are you presenting? I shot this many years ago, and as I went back and looked at the image, I thought, okay, I'll darken just by doing more contrast so that the bird and the background stand out more and I get more of that color. That's all I've done on this is the contrast level. Then that tends to take you out that way, so I'll just flip it around the other way, and I just think it reads better that way. There's the osprey again, similar to some of the ones I did before. That was the sky. I don't care about the skies. I mean, I do. I would wish they would have nice clouds and so on, but I know it's so easy to put clouds in the image and to create a whole different feeling. And so I did that and created an evening and then highlighted the bird and the wings and brought a little bit more saturation into the color of the wings to match the color in the sky. Same with this one, the clouds, brighten the bird. How about single tone? Everything a single tone of blue in this, other than the eye, but overall, beautiful. And reading left to right works extremely well. And having it as a square format, I think, emphasizes even more the main element of the image. But single tone, enhancement, here's that dark against light at the top. I'm very careful, this is not my image, I'm very careful, I want to point out that if something's on the edge, it needs to either be in or out. In this case, it is in, but if it was cropped very tightly, right where that little piece of the tree is sticking up, it wouldn't be quite in, and it would seem awkward. So be careful about how you crop. These two sticking up here points up to the upper portion. This is a very strong image, but a single tone overall, very pretty. This I shot in Costa Rica, and actually it's two images that I shot at the same time. The flower was one image, the hummingbird was a separate. It was flying around, I could never catch it when it just was putting its beak into the flower, so I photographed the hummingbird and then photographed the flower and put the two together and created a vertical image from it. So there was one shot. Shot this in Catalucci Valley. And actually, during the elk rut in September, the males very carefully go after the females. I shouldn't say carefully, go after them a lot and stand near them. And so early morning fog in the valley allowed the head of the male to stand out because of the dark against the light. And even in the case of the female, not quite real dark, but stands out nicely. Now, darkened a little along the top, darkened a little along the bottom, but didn't lose any of the detail. But if you just stand back a little bit and look at this, those two strips of dark push you down into the image to go where I want you to see. And left to right, I didn't want it to be centered. If you have something centered, the viewer then tends to look over on the right-hand side and try finds things there. This way, the eye comes in from the left, looks at the two, and stays there. A little farther down the road, this was happening. The sun was shining through those trees and creating those rays. And I thought, oh, this is very so neat. And here's this highlight, but it doesn't tell a story. It's not anything specific. So I took one of the shots of, and put it in there and lightened it so that it could be the idea that it's standing in that ray coming in. Now look at the difference of, go from here to tell a story. And I've lightened up the foreground. Look at the difference here. See the foreground here? It's dark, the tree. Now I open up those details and put the elk in there. Now you can't stop looking at that elk on the left-hand side. And the darker and most important part of the image here is heavy, so it pushes you back to the left. Shot this of the sloth in Costa Rica, and I was trying to get a different perspective and trying to see if he was going to be against something dark in the background. But all those bright areas back there, you just get lost in that. And I thought, okay, I will need to do some kind of a composite. So I'll need to do a selection of the sloth and the tree and maybe the leaves and then change the background. So this is what I did to it. I selected that portion of the image and put a different background in altogether with leaves and branches. And look at that image now compared to the original. And I lightened the face to get the detail in there. So I made sure that my exposure was correct, knowing that I would replace the background so that the sloth would stand out very much so from the background. Tells a story. This is also in a zoo, and here they are. And the male seems to be a little angry. Okay, but I thought I'll just crop in more and change the background. So it works. This one works, but I thought I'll just make it more of an outdoor image. And so I put a different sky in. Then I thought, well, maybe I'll just put some greenery in. So my point is that you work on an image in multiple ways so that, and you look at the cropping. I cropped in tight on them because they are the main subject, and there was too much other areas for the viewer to roam around and not see exactly what I wanted, and then to place even against the foliage in the background. Oh, and the foreground, good detail in the rocks. This is one of my most favorite areas. It's El Capitan in Yosemite and the Three Brothers on the right-hand side. Now, this is a panorama, but here's the Merced River, all the reflections. And I wanted to capture this so that I could get great detail and sharpness throughout. So I did a panorama, and it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 shots. Now, when you do a panorama, you should overlap by a third. Well, I wasn't on a tripod. I was just hand holding. So I just estimated, and you'll see that in some cases I've overlapped more than a third. It doesn't matter. Photoshop will put them together. It's just that you need at least a third of an image overlap. And that's what you can get out of it. And then highlighted the trees, brought a little more green out of those. the clouds were doing nice things for me. But you don't just do panoramas left to right. How about vertically? There's the first shot. Second shot, look how much I overlapped on that second shot and just to the right a little bit. And then again, hand holding, did another shot on down and then another shot. And when I put them all together and brought out the colors, this is what I have with a large number of pixels that I can make a very large print. So captured and presented, color, black and white, digital art. Let's talk about color just a little bit. Here's this image, very interesting, tells a story. It's flat. If we do nothing more than to bring out the darker blue and a little more contrast in the image, see how flat the image looks? Now look how more three-dimensional and that blue, very pretty blue color. The red behind the bird, very good color aspects to bring out the greens and blues within the bird. Background, bring it out a little bit more color, and it now has pop. It's telling a story, but it has such a difference of color from here, which is flat, to bring higher contrast and saturation in the color. Then I cropped in on it because I thought it was a little bit too much on the left for you to roam around. So if I crop in, it really tells the story much more. See, I didn't need to crop on the top or anything, just cropped in on the left and allowed this to be the subject. Color, special. Triptych, up close and personal with each of them, and just put them together into a single image. So color, let's look at black and white. Again, shot it in Costa Rica, frog in the water. Good composition. Could get that very good reflection. It's very sharp. I thought, okay, but let's look at it as a black and white. Oh, maybe that's a little bit too bright. But as a black and white, sepia. In fact, I like it as a sepia better than the color image. I think that's very good. I'm just personal preference. Doing it as a sepia. How about a very beautiful scenic and take it to black and white? And I think it truly has impact as a black and white. But more contrast needed. All this foreground there's detail, but it's too bright. And you tend to stay in the bottom portion of this image. Even with this circle around up here in the clouds, you tend to be down in here. So darkening that and allowing this image to be a little more contrast really gives impact and brings your eye up to the center of the image. This one, I think, just works out so well. Here it is in color, and I think it's a very good shot, sharp, brighter on the face. The eye is working well. As a black and white, I think it just jumps off the screen as a black and white and looks really good. The composition is very superb, but the black and white, and you notice that the background, I did a little bit more darkening around and allowing the highlight right around the bird, because the bird then is dark against light. Where here, it's dark and somewhat light, but it doesn't emphasize it in the sense of having a spotlight in the background to bring your eye more to the bird. This one, and I don't even like it as a color, but as a black and white, it stands out. It has detail everywhere. It shows design, elements. Your eye flows down here and around at the top. Good detail. Interesting black and white. This one, very good as a color image. Good detail everywhere that it should be. Good composition. Your eye comes in from the top, left, goes around, comes down the bottom, circles back up, and it works really well as a black and white. So don't head yourself of saying, oh, no, no, black and white, just go for that also. Magnolia, which is a white flower, but it has a yellow center, and I wanted to just do it as a black and white, put it on a black background so that it stands out even more. And the way that I could get this to have all of its petals out fully was to take it off the tree when it was just a bud, put it in a bucket of water overnight, and then in the morning, it just started to open up a little bit at a time, and I just kept shooting until it opened fully, and all the petals were so firm and good looking. Otherwise, it then starts to, you wait too long, they start to fall off. Having white on white rather than white on black. And I think that works really well also. And it was a different magnolia, but just this petal curved brings you right up to the center, and having that just a little dark. So this is a high key image. There are no black areas in this image. Even more so here. Well, there's one tiny little spot that's black. All high key images, close up of the magnolia. And of the bird, light against dark, high key images. Artistic reality now with contrast. Certainly, I will flip this horizontally because your eye comes in, sees that branch, the reflection takes you off to the right. Now you come in and you see the head and the reflection. But the high key of all that background being white, don't shy away from doing that. It's very striking, very three-dimensional. Same with this one. Elk standing out against that bright background. The dark tree against the background. All the dark limbs against a very bright white background. And this now is a sepia. So it took a color image and changed it into a sepia rather than having all blue in the sky. In fact, I lightened the blue and then darkened the bottom and had it be more of a sepia, creates 3-dimension. That really stands out. This one I got off the web. I thought, here's the background. Look at this. Up in the upper left, a good amount of tree hanging down. All on the right-hand side, a good amount. So here's the brightest area in the center. And the image was presented with that right in the center of it. And then when you think about how that looks, your eye goes right to it. So black and white, sepia, digital art composites. Sally Hill again, creating the background. Look at the detail in the face. Look how she's put the darker area, then a little lighter, but dark. How the bird stands in there, the feathers against the brighter area up in the top. Really well done color, artistic digital art color. She did this for Christmas time, put the bird in there with the wreath formed this way, and the light area there, a little darker in the lower left. So very creative digital art. Kelly Dobson is a very close friend of mine. She lives up in Michigan. And she sent this to me recently, and she said, okay, it's a composite. Well, no kidding. And here's a bird, a duck, the bubbles, but look at the creativity of this. The only thing I think is that the part of the bear is over here on the left. I think that should have been removed, but that's just how she wanted to see it. I think it's striking. Very artistic composite. Instant impact, strong composition, presentation overall. That's what you need to be doing. I do the Smoky Mountain every year, mid-April. If you're interested, you're on my email list. These are some of the shots I've done there in the past. I also have some books. Volume 2 teaches you how to do stripping, sophisticated stripper, things like that. But I think the one, if you want to learn how to do some things in Photoshop, number 4 is the one, because it talks about the basics of layers, masks, making selections, using layers and masks and those kinds of things. So volume 4. And the books are $30. And you download the images, or I'll send the images that I use in each of the exercises. And you work on the same images step by step in the exercises that are in the book. Volume 8, another one of digital aspects, what I call a scrunch and stretch, but different things. And one of the things in volume 8 is this. This is up at Berry College. And I photographed it and thought, okay, it would be neat if I could change spring into autumn. So I came up with a method in Photoshop. It's really fairly easy to change an image into an autumn scene from spring to autumn. And that's in volume 8. I also, of course, have a book on Yosemite and all the places, when to go to those special places, what settings to use, what locations to stand, all the major areas within Yosemite. So don't think it's hard, just work at it a little bit. It will come to you. You really can do it. Just learn it one step at a time. That's the key element of learning these things one step at a time. Just mention that I do Zoom session tutorings on an hourly rate. If you're interested, just send me an email, jmarianaphotography@gmail.com, and we can do Zoom session learning. I'll teach you Photoshop from basics on up to more sophisticated Photoshop. And you can become a member of my email list and get notices of workshops, and I send out learning articles talking about how to do certain things with certain images and present certain images that I think are really very striking and talk about those. Those are the articles. So send me an email to this and I will put you on my email list. One last thought. How about this? I found these. This is great. We're talking about nature, flora persona. Every aspect in this image is a person. This is the back of a person, their bottom. Each one of these is a person with their arms up, all the way up to the curl made out of people. Every one of these, people. People. Up in here also, all parts of a body. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you tonight. I
John,
enjoy
thank you.
giving presentations. Thank you very much.
You got anybody got any questions for John?
John, just a comment. I always enjoy your presentations, but this one I just really enjoyed more because you seem to focus more on selling the looking from the left and the right than you have
Yes.
in the past, and I think it's very effective. Thank you.
Oh, good. Thank you.